And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Thursday, June 26, 2025. Starting out with, as of this Thursday morning, we do have low pressure that's located southwest of the Gulf in the North Pacific with an occluded front kind of nudging up toward the southern part of the Panhandle. Meanwhile, IFR conditions projecting further ahead here into Friday. We have the thermal trough located across the interior, as is pretty much a semi-permanent feature of summertime. But we do expect Friday morning IFR conditions along the Beaufort Sea, Chukchi Sea coastline due to low stratus and fog. Also, some low stratus fog extending out portions of the Bering from St. Matthew down to St. Paul and especially along the Aleutian chain. And we also find some IFR conditions Friday morning. Southern part of the Panhandle at Prince of Wales Island, Ketchikan, on up along the intercoastal mountains. And for Friday afternoon with the daytime heating, there could be a few thunderstorms pop up, especially around the vicinity of the Yukon Flats and the east-southeast facing slopes there, the Brooks Range. Otherwise, generally VFR conditions pretty prevalent throughout much of the mainland. And still IFR conditions over the Chukchi Sea and again out over areas of the Bering extending from St. Matthew down to St. Paul out to the western Aleutians. By Saturday morning, small chance there could be an isolated shower thunderstorm upper Tanana Valley. Otherwise, generally VFR conditions for the mainland, but more extensive IFR conditions expected Saturday morning across the Panhandle. And then again, just off of the Beaufort, Chukchi Sea coastlines and then extending out through the eastern Aleutians from St. Lawrence Island down through St. Matthew, St. Paul, and then north side of the Alaska Peninsula, at least the lower end, trailing out through the Aleutian chain. And for Saturday afternoon, there could still be a few thunderstorms redevelop from the eastern Brooks Range, those south and southeast facing slopes, down across the Yukon Flats to 40-mile Gold Country, middle upper Tanana Valley. And as we look over the Panhandle, still persistent IFR conditions expected there. And also off of the Beaufort Sea and out over the Chukchi Sea, we find IFR conditions and that extend again down just off of the west coast, off the Seward coastline, the YK deltas. But we do find IFR conditions from St. Lawrence Island down through Nunavik Island to areas along and north of the lower Alaska Peninsula and then across the central and western Aleutians. Past conditions for Friday. Anaktuvik Pass, VFR, but an isolated thunderstorm could develop within vicinity of the pass. Same thing, Adigan, VFR on Friday, but an isolated thunderstorm could develop in the vicinity of the pass. Lake Clark and Merrill, the west arm of the Alaska Range, start out MVFR in the morning, give way to VFR conditions. Same thing, Rainy Pass, MVFR early in the day, giving way to VFR. Generally, VFR conditions should prevail through the rest of the Alaska Range. Windy Pass eastward through Isabel and Mentasta. Dropping down in the Copper River Basin, generally VFR conditions expected there. Now, I should mention, anywhere in the interior where there are active fires, you're going to be dealing with some smoke and haze and certainly more localized, restricted conditions when you're in the vicinity of these active fires. But coming back through the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass, generally VFR conditions. Portage, VFR with MVFR in the morning outside of the east entrance out over Prince William Sound, becoming VFR. And then finally in the north end of the Panhandle at Chilkoot and White, look for IFR conditions early in the day, becoming VFR. And looking at the freezing levels at the surface, we find the surface freezing line out over the middle Chukchi Sea to just off of the Beaufort Sea coast. And then freezing levels aloft do rise upwards above 10,000 feet, but that's well south and west of the Aleutian chain. We actually have a general pocket of a little relatively cooler air aloft. This is all associated with the general low pressure pattern across the Gulf, Alaska Peninsula back toward the lower half of the Bering. It's just been the general region where we've had these weaker areas of low pressure, so the air aloft is colder there at or below 6,000 feet from the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, southwestward across the Alaska Peninsula. And where we have some thicker cloud cover and precipitation being produced, there's the potential for some moderate icing. Areas of the panhandle, central southern panhandle into the eastern Gulf, as well as along and east of Kodiak Island, generally above 8,000 feet. As we get inland, there may be some isolated moderate icing if you have any thicker cloud cover or any shower cells that can build up to higher levels, but that would be above 10,000 feet. And looking at the jet stream, no strong winds really across the mainland. Northwest Canada, fairly light winds. A notable wind field is south of the Gulf in the North Pacific, 80-85 knots out of the west, and then we have a northerly flow across the central Aleutians upwards of 75 knots, bringing it down to 9,000 feet or 700 millibars. Again, relatively light winds most of the mainland. A belt of winds out over the North Pacific south of the Gulf. You can kind of see hints of that mid-level circulation of the low, kind of just southeast there of Kodiak Island, and then back here and through the Aleutians. Relatively light winds. And then for 3,000 feet there above the surface on Friday, we find there's a kind of a low circulation just south of Kodiak Island, and kind of imply this frontal boundary extending east-northeastward toward the outer Panhandle coast. And then out across the Bering Sea, we have not a whole lot going on out there either by standards. So the potential for turbulence on Friday focused in a couple of areas. One in the southern Panhandle around Prince of Wales Island, perhaps over toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla. There could be some moderate turbulence, surface to 6,000 feet. And then back here toward the lower Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, Shelikof Strait, northern Kodiak Island to Lake Iliamna, there could be some moderate turbulence, surface to 5, surface to 6,000 feet on Friday.